Title: Mark Waid hates whites, the racist rabbit hole. So I probably can't use that word on any YouTube title. They delist things, keywords, certain keywords. It doesn't really matter on a channel this tiny, but on a bigger channel it would matter. This is about why people on the left use blonde and red-headed people as the antagonists. And as I flip through this book, this is Ignited 2, issue 2, by Waid and Osa Jeffo and some other people. Notice the preponderance of the percentages of blonde and red-haired people. And keep in mind that this is set in American Southwest somewhere. I believe it's set in Arizona. I actually took a look at Ignited number 1, but so many other people had already reviewed it, including a guy called Pocket Jacks Comics, who's pretty funny. If you look at Ignited number 1, which I can take a look at, but there's some shooting that happened like 3 months ago over the summer, and so the whole comic, these people are walking around a schoolyard, a school, and there are bullet holes still in the walls. Let me tell you, if there's a shooting anywhere at a school or an employment, anywhere, the first thing the school would do is, after the crime scene was done and they released the scene to the school, you would have the janitors and, my God, you would have the teachers go in there with a spackle or cement or whatever. You would spackle those bullet holes way before students were ever allowed in. There are not that many bullet holes in any shootings, but in Ignited number 1, they have all the background walls are just, it is like a Mexican standoff or something. They are just ridden with bullet holes. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Anyway, you can take a look at Ignited number 1. It's not a cringe overload. It's pretty bad because the whole premise is kind of silly. But Ignited number 2 is beyond weird. So as we flip through this, take a gander at the red and blonde hair. Why people on the left use blonde and red-headed people as the antagonists. The simple answer is they want you to know that they are European people, specifically German, because allegedly 75 years ago, some people did some things. Thanks to Ilhan Omar for that great quote. People have noticed that red-headed characters, like a certain mermaid, was replaced with a black character. Then people started noticing that other red-headed characters have been replaced by Africans. It's called blackwashing. And if you believe in left-wing ideology, it doesn't make sense. There are no shortages of Africans. Take a look at Africa. The place is full of them. But blondes and redheads are a tiny minority. Red-haired people are an absolute global minority. So what Hollywood is doing is replacing a minority with a majority, simply because the blondes and reds are from Europe. What makes it worse is that the Irish have been marginalized and oppressed. They are still oppressed to this day. The Little Mermaid is a Danish story, and to replace a red with an African is the very definition of cultural appropriation. In all seriousness, there is serious racism against Europeans and gingers in particular. Think of the meme, "Gingers have no soul." What if people said that the Japanese have no souls? Or Jews or Nigerians? People would lose their freaking minds. And yet it's somehow acceptable to be racist against the ultimate minority simply because they're European. The people on the left don't believe in the principles that racism and sexism are wrong. They are the most racist and sexist people you will meet. I suppose when I was younger, I assumed that the left was against racism and sexism, that they had principles. I very quickly learned that, nope, the left is even more bigoted and prejudiced than the right. Not only were they overtly racist against Europeans, they also firmly believe in the soft bigotry of lowered expectations. They treat non-Europeans as slightly retarded children. They completely ignore racism from non-Europeans, or if forced to confront it, say it's between a Chinese and an African, they will work out some weird calculus to determine who is oppressing whom. Plot twist, it will always be the Chinese oppressing the African, because the left wing treats darker skin like plot armor. When you think about it, it's racist to believe that Africans can't oppress Chinese or whoever, but the left always seems to paint themselves into a corner. Anyway, Ignited is pretty stupid. I think it's set in Arizona, but most of the characters... This is so freaking bizarre. Take a look at this image here. Oh my God, all these images. It's supposed to be, I think it's set in Arizona, or at least the Southwest. Most of the characters are blonde, red, or African American. If you're in America and you're familiar with California, Arizona, whatever, it's pretty much northern Mexico in current year. And Ignited in a high school that should be at least half Mexican, the Mexicans are completely missing from the story. You will never see this in Arizona. Is this like Scotland or Ireland or Sweden or something? This strange, weird utopia of some African Americans, and so many strawberry blondes, and redheads. Maybe one Asian chick. Realistically, you in Arizona or the Southwest, anywhere, you're going to have some African Americans. You're going to have schools that are 90% Mexican. This is totally bizarre. Anyway, in many Southwestern schools, you'll almost never hear English spoken. It's all Spanish. You're not going to find these blonde or redheaded people unless it comes from a bottle. Can you dye black hair red or blonde? I'm not sure. Sometimes certain hairs don't take dyes as easily as others. You're not going to find it. Okay. But Mexicans make Mark Waid and people like him very, very uncomfortable. They know that there's a ton of conflict between Mexican and African Americans and plenty of racism going back and forth. But this doesn't fit Mark Waid's narrative. Waid is only interested in perpetuating the incessant hatred of Europeans, specifically Germans, thus the blonde or red hair fixation. So, thus the reason you'll see so many blondes and redheads. These left-wing artists don't want the... And I use the term artist for Waid very, very loosely. He used to be a better writer than he is now. I hate to blame Trump for a lot of people losing their minds, but it's kind of the 2015 made people crazy. It violated their expectations, partially because CNN, MSNBC told everyone in 2015 that there was no way Trump could win an election. It wasn't possible. And so a lot of these kids and even adults, my God, even talking 40, 50, 60-year-old adults who it was inconceivable to them that Trump would win. Because, admittedly, the guy's, at the time, he was perceived as kind of a clown, but as it turned out, he's actually a very competent president. I can admit I was wrong about Trump. I thought he was an idiot. I mean, not an idiot, but I thought he was a clown. Turns out he can lead a country very, very well. He's a very smart guy. I made a mistake. I got over it. That's because that's what adults do. They admit their mistakes and they get over it. It's bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Okay, so the reason you'll see so many blondes and redheads, these left-wing artists don't want the viewer to see even the principal. I think this guy's supposed to be the principal, is a blonde. Let me tell you, a lot of these schools in the Southwest, the teachers, the administrators, they're all Mexican Americans too. Even the local police force, the firemen, it's all Mexican Americans. It's a Mexican American counties. It's not this isn't little Germany. It's, if anything, it's little Guatemala. The artists, the reason they do this is because the artists don't want the viewer to see a character with black hair and eyes. It will somewhat confuse them. So a Portuguese, Spanish, or Italian person and confuse them with an actual Latin American. They sort of believe that a Brazilian is good, but a Portuguese from Portugal is bad, or if not bad exactly, but they aren't as high on the oppression scale, which is kind of awkward because there's a ton of discrimination against people from the Mediterranean. There's also a ton of discrimination against Eastern Europeans, but people on the left don't want to address that issue, any issue that creates sympathy for anyone from Europe. So you get these weird comic book panels where 95% of the bad guys are, 1, guys, and 2, blonde or red or even strawberry blonde. Once you notice this, you can't unnotice it. Oh, dog, stay put. Let me, This is, they're having a free speech assembly, a First Amendment, constitutionally protected activity by the First Amendment. Constitution, Bill of Rights, right? So they're having this free speech assembly. All these little Aryan kids. Come on, this is insane. I'm not taking crazy pills. I'm not the only one who sees this. I know I'm not the only one who sees this. So because it's Mark Waid, who's probably insane. He's not well. I've heard he has anger issues. I made a video. The one video I made, it got 3,000 views, which for this channel is totally off the wall. Where I read his GoFundMe comments before he deleted them. People talked about his alleged anger issues. Focus on these little Aryans, on these evil little Germans, blonde hair, blue eyed people. He's got some issues, and I hope Meyer takes him to the cleaner. Anyway, this is nowhere in the American Southwest, not even at a private school. All the strawberry blondes are in the forefront, and possible Mexican American are in the background. Okay, here's the weird thing: African American, Aryan, German, possibly Asian. This should be at least half Mexican. What would Mexican Americans look like in a comic book? Well, they're a little shorter, they have dark hair, and they have dark eyes. That's what Mexican Americans look like. But the problem is, unfortunately, Mexican Americans also have some similarity at first blush to the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the Italian. They all have dark hair, dark eyes, usually. So when you're writing a comic book, you can't include those characters. Like most of the school would look like this, darker, but with dark hair, not with brown hair. They don't look like this. This is a weird racist fantasy of people like Mark Waid and what's his name, Kwanzaa Osajefa. No, maybe in Germany or Sweden, you see these people. I mean, they're in the background, but literally they're all blonde, auburn hair. I don't know if that's black hair or a hat. Blonde, a hat. Sometimes these woke comic books will have people wearing hats because otherwise it's literally everyone is blonde. So sometimes you got to try to cover their hair like they did with the last panel with the police. So these kids are having a peaceful assembly talking about crime and wanting to be... They wanted their teachers to be armed. And so this guy, who is obviously, Mark Waid's... comes along in an armored personnel carrier and attacks this free speech event where the kids are gathered to talk about the threat to their safety. All these kids, and they attack them. How does this make it when Mark Waid and Kwanzaa sit down together? How does this make it past? I mean, at some point, don't they look at each other and say, "Are we out of our minds? What is wrong with us? Why do we hate European people so badly? My God, why do we hate the Bill of Rights? Why do we hate free speech so badly? What is so terrifying about free speech?" Well, what's so terrifying about free speech is if you have ideas that can't be defended in a debate or dialogue discussion, you need to silence your opponent. And Mark Waid has ideas, and Kwanzaa probably also has ideas that cannot be defended. So they literally need to tear the man's tongue out to prevent his speech. Anyway, this went on longer than I thought. But check out, what's it? I forget the name of it already. Ignited on, I don't know where you can find it. You can find it somewhere. Buy it used. I don't know if there's a used market for Ignited, but it's, if you paid $4 for this comic with the bullet holes, then you definitely paid $4 too much. What can I say that's positive about it? Some of the art is pretty good. That's about the only thing I could say. If you deleted these words of just racist, sexist nonsense. Well, I don't know if there's any sexism in here. Do I even want to talk about this? Do I want to say? Okay. I'm at the end of the video, so no one's going to get this far, so I can say it. School shootings like this, the one that inspired our story, happen in real life in this country with despicable frequency. No, they don't. There's a third of a billion people in the United States. School shootings are very, very far down the list. You need to worry more about secondhand smoke and obesity than school shootings. If you had a campaign to tell people to wear their seatbelts each and every time they went out in a car, you would save more lives than school shootings took. We reached out to various students who have survived these shootings and invited them to speak their minds openly in the pages of Ignited, saying whatever they feel needs saying. We'll be publishing their responses in each issue. What if the students said, hey, actually school shootings aren't really an issue. What is an issue is violent crime in the inner cities. Oh, needle scratch on a record. We can't talk about violent crime in the inner cities because of the people who commit it. It makes us our white, smarmy, liberal hearts feel very, very uncomfortable when we discuss that. So we don't. It's called a false equivalence, or rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic is the crime rates, the violent crime rates. Well, isn't school shootings a part of that violent crime? It is a very minuscule, small fraction of a percentage of the violent crime. Look up the crime rates. It's not school shootings that are killing people. Much of the narrative surrounding mass shootings is focused on the shooter's motivation. Most shootings, most homicide from guns is not mass shootings. It's from just some robbery or drug dealer. But because of the people who are committing those crimes, people like Mark Waid feel very, very uncomfortable talking about those people. Anyway, this is nonsense. This is just Titanic level nonsense. Anyway, leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you're not already subscribed.